Hello, dear friends of Palestine and of the Edward Said National Conservatory of Music, and all good wishers everywhere. And we know we have people from everywhere. Welcome to you all, and welcome to our PalMusic's 2021 concert at Christmastide, which I hope will give you enormous pleasure and hope and buoy up your Christmas spirit in these exceptionally difficult times. Well, maybe they're not more difficult than ever, but they do feel more difficult at the moment. We've put together an excellent program, and I must at once thank Wissam Bustani for all his hard work, and Lena Saleh, who does so much for the Conservatoire and also for us, and all our other supporters, without whom we couldn't operate. PalMusic, as many of you know, is a small and energetic charity which supports emerging Palestinian musicians in Palestine, in the UK and beyond. We are technically, or legally, the UK friends of the Edward Said National Conservatory of Music, Palestine's conservatoire centered in Ramallah, but with other branches. In 2016, we brought over the Palestine Youth Orchestra for a tour of the UK, a highly successful tour, where most of the, in fact, all the concert halls were full, packed. And when financially possible, and we wish we could do it more often, we fund young, emerging, exceptional Palestinian musicians to pursue their studies in the UK. At the moment, we have one young man, very young man, in Manchester. So exciting. We try also to send teachers to the Conservatoire, which is not always easy, and we would very much like to send more teachers there. And people who go to Palestine realize how lucky they are to be there. I know that sounds odd, but it's true. It's a very special place. Here in the UK, we hold concerts, and all the time we try to bring Palestinian music in all its complexity and joy to a wider audience in the UK. Our next concert, which is going to be our first face-to-face concert since COVID struck, God willing, is in the well-known St. George's Hall, Brandon Hill, Bristol, on Sunday the 6th of February at 4 p.m. If you don't have that written down and you need it, it's on the PalMusic website, it's all there. When the pianist and great supporter of PalMusic, Iyad Sureya, will be playing. And after this, we had a very successful online auction this autumn. And as a result of that, we're able, we hope, to expand our really important musical long distance learning to Gaza and to the West Bank, which helps both students and teachers widen their creative horizons and provides a link, a musical link for both teachers and pupils. Today, we're lucky to have the Rev.Dr. Mitri Raheb as our guest speaker. His roots in Bethlehem are deep, and Lena Saleh will introduce him later. We are lucky too to hear the superb and hope I could say this, unconventional cellist, Naseem Alatrash. I hope you don't mind being described that way, Naseem. And after Naseem's video part of Risala, we'll hold a Q&A session. Please could anyone, this is a bit of housekeeping, please could anyone who wants to ask a question, put it in the chat and put a capital Q at the front so we know what it is, please. This concert is of course free, and it's our gift you all at Christmas and our joy. But I have to say we'd welcome any donations that you feel like giving. There's a link to donate in the chat. And anyway, you can always find the link on palmusic.org.uk. Easy. But that is not the most important thing. The most important thing is to enjoy the concert and to feel a sense of the Christmas spirit that we feel every year, despite any adversity. And I'd like to start it now with a video of the little drummer boy.
Caroline, your microphone.
Come, they told me, ba-rum, pum, 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 a newborn king to see, ba-rum, pum, pum, pum. Our finest gifts we bring, pa-rum, pum, 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 to lay before the king, pa-rum, pum, 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 rum, pum, pum, pum. Rum, pum, pum, pum. And so to honor him, rum, pum, 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 when we come, when we come, when we come.
في نجمي ضوت في السما من بعيد، هالنجمة كانت من ملاك الرب، ولد المسيح بارم بابا بام بام، سبحوه يا جميع الناس، هللو هللو. Sulla strada parapapam, un tamburino va parapapam, al ritmo del suo cuor parapapam, segnando il passo va parapapam, rapapam. Pam pam, bimbo dimmi un po' pam pam, dove vai tu? أولاك العيد في عنده وجهين، في وجه بيضحك والتاني حزين، والحزن الطالع من جوا موجوع، في دموع وصوت بيصرخ عنا جوع، مش مسموع صوته بمغارة صغيرة ولد طفل فقير، بشار العالم بفرح عظيم، خلص العالم من حزنه وأوجاعه، بتلاحم صار فيها حدث كبير وفرح كبير وأمل كبير.
Well, that's a nice start for our concert tonight. Listening to those voices reminds me that we're all human, and yet we're all so completely different at the same time, each voice unique. We're going to proceed with the next two items of the concert. Actually, students from ESNCM at their graduation ceremony, I think a month ago, we're starting with the flute player from Nablus branch, Rashid Zarour. Just bear with me. That was Rashid Zarour from Nablus branch with the accompanist Dima Milanova. And the next is a wonderful Buzuk ensemble based in Ramallah, playing with their own teacher, Tariq Abushi. I hope I said your name right, Tariq. So those are some of our students at ESNCM. They are the reason why PalMusic exists. They are the future of music and of Palestinian culture, and show the human face of our people. I'd like to hand over to Lena now, who's going to introduce the Rev.Dr. Mitri. Put your microphone on, Lena, please.
Okay, it's fine. Good evening, everyone. I think you're coming from all corners of the world. I'm indeed honored and delighted to have this opportunity of presenting to you Rev.Dr. Mitri Raheb. You will discover the person behind this prestigious name and the mission he has initiated and continues to pursue in his little town of Bethlehem and around the world. Indeed, a rich life of sharing, of giving, and inspiring people young and old. On the personal level, my pleasure is doubled by the fact that I lived in Bethlehem in the 50s and early 60s. As a student, we all knew the father of Dr. Raheb, who had the main stationery shop that served many schools and thousands of students. Dr. Mitri Raheb is known in Bethlehem and beyond as the founder and president of Dar al-Kalima, a university college of arts and culture in Bethlehem. I had the privilege of visiting Dar al-Kalima a couple of years ago. Indeed, a bubbling place where young people from Bethlehem and the vicinity come to learn and discover different aspects of culture, fine arts, film, music, and more. It provides a healthy environment for young people educationally and socially, helps shape their personalities, and orients their commitment to the development of their communities. Rev.Dr. Mitri Raheb is known as the most widely published Palestinian theologian to date, having authored and edited 40 books, which have been translated into 11 languages. He's the senior pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, to which we used to go when we were young. And he was president of the Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. And in 2018, he was elected to the Palestinian National Council. Dr. Raheb has a doctorate in theology from Philipps University at Marburg, Germany, and has received an honorary doctorate degree from Concordia University in Chicago. He's the recipient of several prestigious national and international awards. Just to cite a few, the Tolerance Award from the European Academy of Science and Arts, the German Media Prize. This is usually awarded to heads of state like Presidents Obama, Clinton, Mandela, Chancellor Merkel, and King Hussein of Jordan and others. Indeed, a very prestigious award. And he also received the Olof Palme Prize in 2015. Last but not least, he received the International Muhammad Shalabi Peace Award of the Central Islam Archive in Germany in 2006 for his interfaith work. His work has received wide media attention on international and regional platforms. Ahlan wa sahlan, Dr. Raheb. It's indeed my great pleasure as a partial Bethlehemite to welcome you.
Thank you, Lena, for this introduction, and good to know that you used to worship at our church and that you knew even my father. This is really amazing. I mean, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I greet you from the little town of Bethlehem in this Advent and Christmas season. And I would like actually to thank PalMusic UK for the incredible work you are doing in the UK and beyond in support of Edward Said Music Conservatory, because the conservatory is doing a great job in Palestine in investing in the next generation of creative leaders. And I have to say that we used to host the conservatory at our center, Dar al-Nadwa, for several years. And my wife, actually, Najwa, served on the board of the conservatory for several years as well. So we have this long history, and I'm glad that you are supporting this very important work. You know, it's Christmas time, so I thought to focus a bit on Bethlehem and music, because there is a very special relationship between Bethlehem and music. If we go to the Bible, David was a Bethlehemite, and we know he used to play the harp. So this is one of the stories of musicians we hear actually in the Old Testament. But remember on Christmas Eve, when the angels appeared to the shepherds on the shepherd fields, we hear about the choir of angels who started singing. So Christmas and music and singing are very much connected. And if we look actually at the song that the angels sang, it's a bit a political song. They spoke about glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to the people. And glory to God actually meant glory is not to Caesar and not to the political powers of that time, meaning the Romans, but to God. And peace on earth, that was also a critique of the, if you want, the Pax Romana that was based on oppression and dominion rather than on justice. And so the angels were proclaiming a peace that is really based on justice and justice for everyone, not only for the few. This is why goodwill to people includes actually all people, irrespective of their nationality, religion, ethnicity, you name it. It should be good news to everyone. And this is really the message that came out of Bethlehem. And it's still so much needed in the world today. And we need really to continue this message that came out of Bethlehem. You know, the work that the conservatory is doing is so important, because as a president of the first and only University of Arts and Culture in Palestine, I know how important art and music are. You know, sometimes people think music is a luxury for people living under occupation. It's not at all, because remember, people do not live on bread alone. Actually, music is, if you want, is the food for the soul. I think when we heard the music this few minutes ago, the boy drummer, I mean, it lifted our spirits. It introduced us to the spirit of Christmas. It is so important, this music, because our people need that. And so I would like to mention 3 important reasons why music and art are so essential, not only for us Palestinians, but worldwide, but especially for us Palestinians. First, music actually and art is a therapy. You know, our people have been going through tough times. Actually, Johns Hopkins University did a few years ago a study, and they found out that 85% of our people are somehow traumatized. We once invited one of the top actually experts in post-traumatic stress to come and help us. And after spending with us 3 months, he told me, look, Mitri, I mean, my specialty in post-traumatic stress, but you are not in a post-era yet. Your trauma has been going on for over 1 century, and it's not ending yet. And this is something we did not actually find a cure to. But art and music can help here, because they can actually help people not only survive, but thrive in spite of everything. Second, music and art are actually a tool for what I call a creative resistance. Resisting the stereotype that the media wants to put on us as Palestinians. But not only as Palestinians, many people in the world, the oppressed, are usually accused of being so many things, negative images. But we saw, I mean, the students of the conservatory playing, all these different instruments. This is the image of Palestine. This is so important to show, the human face of the Palestinian, and the musicians, the young musicians that are actually playing these wonderful tunes as their message to the world. And third and last, music and art are a very important tool for communication. It communicates our story, a different kind of story. Sometimes, people are bored and fed up with political rhetorics. But these young artists, when they do a film, they actually reach hundreds of thousands of people that politicians cannot reach. The musician can use universal language actually to share the story of Palestine in a creative way. And so it's not by chance, I think, that the angels chose music to spread the good news to the world. They did not choose just political rhetorics, though their message was very much political, but they chose as the tool music, choir. And I think what we are doing is to continuing this story that was heard 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, to continuing it today, so that Palestine can continue actually to share the good news and not only bad news. So I would like to encourage everyone who is with us tonight to keep supporting the work of PalMusic UK and Edward Said Music Conservatory, because you are investing not only in creativity, but in the future generation of Palestine. And we want to make sure that, our young people will actually continue this work that the angels started. In that sense, our young musicians are actually today's angels. Today's angel playing their music so that the world can hopefully not only listen, but also respond. Respond to bring justice, to bring peace, not only to the Palestinian people, but to everyone in this region and throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Dr. Mitri, thank you so much for your words. I had prepared some questions which you've already, in your words, have opened the door to. But I'm sure we can dig further. Before I proceed with a few questions, Lena had mentioned a couple of days ago that at Dar al-Kalima University, you've opened a new course of technology and innovation of music. Can you tell us a little bit about the university, about this course, and what's happening? It's the first I hear about it.
Yeah, Dar al-Kalima University actually was started in 2006 as a community college. Then we became a university college a few years later. And just 3 months ago, we got the accreditation as a full-fledged university. And we said our mission and focus should be on arts and culture. As Lena mentioned, film, design, music, theater, dance. And this is our newest project, actually, that we are doing with Jafra. We signed the contract just a few days ago. And the idea is to bring technology into music, because today, not only because of the pandemic, but beyond that, we want to help the young artists and musicians to be able to use technology to bring their music into the world, because that's important. We need people to have access, and accessibility is important, especially for the young people who are used to Spotify and so on. So how can we actually encourage entrepreneurship, innovation among the artists and the musician, not only that they can earn their bread and butter by that, but also that they can communicate their skills on a much larger scale. And we are proud to partner with Jafra, with the support of the Ta'awun, to bring this into being.
That's fascinating, really fascinating. And it reminds me of the long distance learning project that PalMusic does with Gaza, of course. But you know, this technology, it's like a medicine. It opens possibilities, but we also need to remember that being human and live contact is no substitute for life itself. And we need to, I don't like to use the word fight, but build projects that have a root in real life, because I worry about the future of live music as we all migrate onto the internet and use this wonderful opportunity of expanding into the world and using technology. But I'm sure you, with your roots in humanity, will find your way through all that. What are your views? There is a question actually that I've always wanted to ask, like a man or a woman from the church, from inside the church, which is, what is exactly the influence of music on the church? And of course, the other way around, the influence of the church and religion, maybe other religions, onto the act of making music. Do you have a view on this? And I'm really interested to know.
Yeah, actually, you know, music and church life or religion in general is very deep and very important. Again, if we go back to David, who was playing the harp, but according to the Bible at least, he wrote the Psalms, which became actually the main content for all hymns in later centuries. So you can see this close connection. But also, if you look at the liturgy of the Orthodox Church and later even the Catholic Church, it was developed in and around Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And actually this created, a tradition of over 2,000 years, because, and actually music, church music was started by the Syriacs already in the early 2nd century, because they saw that actually we need to chant the scripture, which again became important in Islam, because the Quran actually cannot be read. It has to be chanted. And so again, you see there the close relationship between religion and music. And I think because they understood the power of music on the human soul, it enters and it penetrates the heart of the people in a much more powerful word than just hearing words. I have to say this as a Protestant, put the emphasis on the word, not on liturgy. So here I'm contradicting a bit, the the tradition of our church, but actually also from the Lutheran Church. I mean, if you look at Bach and so on, actually, he influenced the Protestant church for over 2 centuries. I mean, we cannot think of the Protestant church without thinking of Bach and Beethoven, etc. They really shaped all the music of the Protestant church in the West. Yeah, so there is this connection that is so important and so powerful. And I tell you, if you go to a church today and there is no music, it's boring.
Well, it's very, very fascinating. Thank you so much for your answer. It does, you know, the language of music is based on 2 fundamental principles, which is dissonance and resolution. Those are the fundamental, this is the fundamental grammar of music. And when you hear a chord that is beautifully in tune, and what it takes for human beings to create that harmonious togetherness physically, I think it serves as a metaphor for life and human relationships. And like you said, not just in words, but it enters the body in a tactile way, in a physical way. And it doesn't surprise me that you say that. I remember once I was preparing for a concert. It was a celebration of Bach's 200th anniversary. And all like 300 flute players were gathered in London to celebrate Bach's music. And I was invited to play. And as I was getting closer to the concert, I was starting to get uncomfortable. You know, all those flute players judging us against each other. And then it was building and building and building until the night before the concert. I went and did something really silly. I just suddenly felt a compulsion to go online and make a big donation to a charity. Because part of me, I live my life as a kind of agnostic, but I love Bach's music. I love his spirituality. And yet I needed to feel some kind of connection with the message of the music. So I had to kind of reach out into humanity in another way. And once I made that donation, something opened and I was able to play with a bit more peace in my heart the next day, instead of being like competitive with other flute players. I found that quite an important moment for me. And what you said resonates so much with what I feel about music. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say at this point?
Maybe just want to add one thing, which the challenge for us as Palestinians right now, I feel, and this is the challenge I see also for our university, is how to develop new tunes that speaks to our body and culture. I mean, with all the love to Bach and to Beethoven and so on, our bodies have a different rhythm. And we have to discover that rhythm that speaks to our body and souls as Palestinians, for the church music, but also in general. And I think this is really the challenge before us. And this is the challenge for the next generation. And I think the more young people we train, the quicker this will come. And this is why I think the mission of the conservatory, the mission of our university is so important. And thank you for supporting that. You are bringing us quicker to the goal that we have inside.
Inshallah, inshallah. It's not easy to define what is Palestinian or what is Lebanese, but the finding that sense of identity coming out from the roots and expanding into the world is really a wonderful challenge. I have one more question for you before we move on, which is, can you talk to us about the general challenges facing Bethlehem, Palestine, specifically in relation to what I would call our fragmented world, you know, which is dominated by strife and violence, really. Do you have a way of kind of embracing this challenge and seeing it in a way that can help us forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge for Bethlehem, as you know, Bethlehem today is surrounded from three sides by 8-meter high wall. It is made as little as 12 square kilometers. And so everywhere you stand, you see the wall in front of you. And we don't want our people to internalize the wall, to think the wall is the end of the story. But how to keep actually in a world that is getting used to building walls, how can we actually create a generation that believe in building bridges? Bridges across culture, bridges across religion, bridges across nation. I think this is a major challenge that we have in front of us. And we need to make sure that all walls will come down so that people can find to each other and live based on equality and injustice and peace. This is, I think, the first challenge for us Palestinians. Worldwide, I feel that the challenge there has to do with populism. You know, the Trumpism that was exported throughout the world. I mean, in Brazil with Bolsonaro, you know, in Eastern Europe, in India, in China, and so on, is frightening because actually it blends religion with nationalism. And this is the worst thing that can happen. We have really to free religion from nationalism and nationalism from religion. That is so important. As I come back to the choir of the angels, giving God the glory, not the nation, and not the Caesar, whoever the Caesar is, and peace on earth for everyone, and not only for the privileges. This is, I think, a major challenge for us today in the world. And I hope that together we can join forces to make sure that tomorrow will be a better world for our kids and grandchildren.
Dr. Mitri, thank you so much. Thank you so much. There will be an opportunity to talk later on in the question and answer session. We just had someone on the chat saying, I'm originally from India. We have to be careful. Well, in the end, we are humans before we are of a nation, I think. And if we forget that, we forget the heart of who we are. Right, let me go on to a very quick introduction of Naseem Alatrash, our featured guest artist, musician. I first met Naseem on the Palestine Youth Orchestra tour to the UK when a few years ago you were a lot younger, your beard was a little bit thinner, and but your heart was glowing from inside the orchestra and every note that you played. And now, of course, you are a graduate from Bethlehem branch of the ESNCM and moved on to study at Berklee College in Boston. And now you're on the faculty teaching along with Laith, your very good friend, leading lights. You shine a light forward for younger musicians to pursue their dream and to find the power of their expression. I'm going to start by playing you something. I'm not going to say what it is, because sometimes words actually get in the way of things. I'm just going to play you the first track, and then we'll talk about it. Wow. Naseem, thank you so, so much. Can you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Thank you, Wissam. Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say good evening to everyone. Greetings from Boston, Massachusetts, from the US. It's an honor to be part of the panel today, along with Dr. Mitri, who I admire a lot from my childhood, and with everyone else who I also am very grateful for all of you. You've been part of my growth as a musician since I was young, and you've been there for the journey. So Lena and Wissam, thank you so much. And Caroline, thank you for having me. Yeah, so this piece, Lifta, to talk a little bit about it, is part of a suite that an idea that I had was to write a suite for cello and string orchestra and percussion and piano. The suite is based on the idea that I wanted to express my story, or the story of Palestine, to the audience around the world, but in a unique way, different way, somehow using music, no words, just music, and connecting on a very humane level. And the idea is that each piece tells a different story of one aspect of life in Palestine. So the first movement is more about life in Bethlehem, the old market in Bethlehem, the church, the mosque, growing up and as a Palestinian from Beit Sahur and Bethlehem region. The second movement is about conflict and about living under violence and occupation, and it's more of a violent movement. And Lifta is actually the third movement of the suite, and it's an elegy. It's a cry out. It's basically the movement for al-Nakba. And when I wrote this piece, I was thinking about the idea of a Palestinian village that is gorgeous, so beautiful, but yet really lonely, empty. There's no life anymore. It's almost like the cello is the voice of a grandchild of one of those families that used to live in that village. And the story is that this musician goes back to the village years later to find the village of his grandparents empty, yet takes the cello and expresses to the world what that feels like. So this is basically the story of Lifta. It's the story of Palestinian refugees. It's the story of the feeling of losing your home, the feeling of having to leave your home. And I wanted that to also be an expression for not only Palestinian refugees, but any refugee. When I wrote this, it was in the middle of the Syrian refugee crisis. The US was not accepting Syrian refugees at the time. There was a lot of talk about that, and I wanted to do something to express. I just wanted to create a humane image, express the human values and the human connection that these refugees are actually going through something that's way beyond what we can express. When I wrote the piece, I went back to Palestine. I wanted to film it in Palestine. And it was not specifically written for Lifta, but it was meant to be written for a Palestinian village. And I talked to a friend of mine about the ideas where we can film it. And I ended up choosing Lifta because it's one of the villages near Jerusalem that all the Palestinian residents were kicked out and had to leave during 1948. And it still sits there and showing the Palestinian identity in the heart of Jerusalem, and it's a beautiful place. Everyone who watched the video, regardless of their nationality, connected to it, and it got such a positive reaction because exactly what I wanted to do exactly happened, which is people really understood the story without any words, just with the music and the video.
That's really beautiful. We're going to hear the last movement of your suite later on. I just want to keep things moving forward. We'll have the chance to discuss other things. I want you all to hear the next video, which is very different, actually. Yes, very different. Just a second. Again, I won't announce it. Just get the full impact of the music.
Και πειραγέρας τη φωνή στα πέλαγα, στα καράβια τα ακούσα. Κι όσα καράβια τα άκουσα, όλα πάνια, μαϊνά
again, I don't know what it feels like listening to that again from your end, but we get the power and the humanity of what you're doing so clearly. Can you talk to us a little bit about the journey of your growth as a musician? I mean, obviously, improvisation is at the heart of it. When did that start? And are there other influences as well as you've taken along the way? Just tell us the story of your journey.
Yeah, it's interesting how musical influences happen in a very unusual and kind of random way when it comes to musicians' growth. Because I grew up in Palestine, started playing the cello, which is known as a classical Western instrument. But right, almost from the start, almost the first few months of picking up the cello, I started playing Arabic music on the cello, because my brother also played oud, and I would hear him practicing all the classics and Arabic pieces, as well as Palestinian folkloric music and so forth. And I remember my first experience playing Arabic music on the cello was playing the introduction of Kulthum's Anta Umri on the cello with my brother playing oud. So that was the start of improvisation for me, using improvisation as part of my musical identity. It started early because Arabic music has improvisation in it, and it's a big part of it, the art of taqasim, what we call taqasim, which is improvisation in Arabic music. Later on, when I went to study music after the AS and CM, I moved to Germany first, because I had studied at the Lutheran Evangelical Church in Bethlehem and Bet Sahur, and we had connections with Germany, and that was what made most sense. And we, through I spoke German, and it was an easy, and of course Germany was the top place for cello studies at the time, and probably still for classical studies. But when I went to Germany, I felt a little disconnected, because whenever I would play Arabic music at the time in the conservatory there, I would get a little weird looks, so what is this guy doing? The style of the way we would play with glissandos, which is the sliding and the microtonality of Arabic music and all of that. I just felt kind of, at the time, you're thinking 12 years ago, it wasn't very common for people to do to use the cello in that way, and especially in Germany, a place where they're very proud of their tradition, of course, classical Western tradition and German music. At that time, I had auditioned for Berklee College Music, which is more of a contemporary music school based out of the American jazz tradition and the blues, and that's really the philosophy of the school, is to focus on the last 100 years of music as a way to educate future musicians. And when I got the full scholarship, including the living, full presidential scholarship, I decided that I wanted to move to the US and study at Berklee, and that was mainly because I was interested in improvisation, and I was interested in composition, and I was interested in using the cello in, you would call it maybe in a more creative way, I would call it. So that was the kind of the moment that everything changed for me, because instead of going for an orchestral training, a regular cello education where you study to become an orchestral musician or a chamber musician, I did something completely different. I studied with Simon Shaheen, who's a Palestinian violinist and oud virtuoso. I studied Arabic maqam and went deep into that. I studied with the jazz cellist as well, Eugene Friesen, and got to get more into the American jazz tradition and jazz harmony and all of that, and improvisation. And after graduation, I started collaborating with more of rock and jazz musicians and Arabic musicians, of course, touring with Simon Shaheen's band and all of that. So that led to where I am right now, which is I'm part of a string quartet, the Turtle Island String Quartet, that has been a voice for improvisation on string and creative string playing since the 80s, I believe. And I also play with the Panamanian jazz pianist Danilo Perez in his Global Messengers group, which is more of it's a jazz music, but mixed with Arabic music, of course, and all the traditions that we bring as members of the band.
I think the last piece we're going to hear will have that melange of Arabic and jazz in it.
Correct.
So what you described as a cultural thing in Germany, I'm not sure it's cultural. I think it's more academic. I think the sensual dysfunction of classically trained musicians is kind of all over the world. I think it's becoming more open and better, but it exists in the UK and this in all the kind of orchestral based, rigid, discipline kind of based teaching. And it's always seemed to me that if you want to express freedom, you need to practice freedom. And if so, improvisation is at the heart of learning to be free with the moment. And that's why I feel that you really pull us into your world, because you have such a complete sensual connection with the evolving moment, because you don't quite know what's coming next. And you take us on this journey with you. What is the difference, would you say, between this world of improvisation and writing down music, now that you're also a composer?
I would say that like it used to be and is still for many composers, improvisation is the first step for composition. That's really all great composers like Bach used to be amazing improvisers as well. So improvisation as the first step to creating, at least for me, that's the essence and getting the first, if you will, the material to work with and the basic motifs to build a composition on. It all for me starts with improvisation. So I would improvise, record the improvisation, go back to the improvisations and see if I can find. It's almost like trying to find little treasures in all of that music, and finding one little thing can be enough for a composition to be constructed out of that.
Wow, that's a good way to use technology, I suppose.
As well, exactly. So having the voice memo on the iPhone can be very useful whenever I would hear an idea or just improvise freely for half an hour or something and record. And sometimes I don't notice what's useful in that improvisation or something that could be used out of it, but sometimes later, maybe years later, I would find things that at the moment I did not notice the potential of this specific melody or so, and then use it in the future, or connect it to another melody that I had composed much earlier. Or so improvisation is really the most important tool for, I think, any musician to connect to their own identity and sound, and from there you can build on that. But and it's also a therapy. It's kind of like a meditation, especially if you do it at the beginning of a practice session. We used to be taught that you need to start practicing scales, and that's the first thing. You can't waste time just playing. You have to actually be practicing, not playing. And just playing around with the instrument is something that was considered, at least for some of people I've worked with, a waste of time. But for me, I consider it that's kind of like a little child who's learning to talk for the first time, learning to walk for the first time. They start by improvising and imitating other people that they watch, and the music is the same. So you have to be a child. You have to have that childish kind of mentality or childish behavior, and when you approach music, if you want to be creative with it.
Absolutely, playing is the first learning, and the deepest learning. It's not just wasting time. We need to move on, and can you tell us a little bit about? We can ask you more questions later on from the people who are listening. Can you tell us about the next movement, Risala, from your suite? And
Absolutely.
then I'll play it.
Yeah, so Risala is the last movement, which the word Risala in Arabic means a message or a letter or a message. But the point of this this movement is the idea that after all of this, that this movement comes right after Lifta, the movement we just heard. So you have to imagine, like, you have that minimalistic movement that's very kind of like a cry and elegy. After that, there's the feeling of being lost and being shattered, and when you've just lost your home and so forth. But the idea is going from there, and the Risala is basically a transition from that being lost to the idea of how the perseverance of Palestinian people, how we continue to spread our message and continue our journey and looking for peace and looking for justice. And so it actually ends up on a bright note with this celebration. The movement starts with the Georgina rhythm, which is an Iraqi rhythm that is what we consider an odd time signature in music, which means it has instability. It's not like, so it feels like this rhythm has this, it's almost swings left and right. But then it goes to a 12/8 rhythm based out of the African and, or you could consider also North African music, which is very groovy, and it's based in this very like, it's a groove that's, it has such a strong gravity to it. And I mixed that with more of kind of folkloric melodies, Levantine type of folkloric melodies. And it also has a lot of improvisations and moments of where the music is completely improvised without any specific form. So the movement really goes through many different moments, and that was a performance. Just to speak a little bit about the performance, that was the first time we performed the music. The music has grown a lot since and changed. But this was the first time we ever tried the score. The score was written by four-time Grammy Award-winning cellist Eugene Friesen, who did the orchestration for the suite. And it was performed, this performance specifically was with the students of Berklee College of Music, string orchestra that are all part of the student body at Berklee, featuring some different artists and faculty at Berklee, such as pianist Chase Morin and percussionist George Lernes, and you have also Palestinian musicians in the band. Firas Zreik and Thaer Badr and Albert Basil from Bethlehem are all in the performance that you're about to watch.
Okay, let's jump in, guys. Thank you so much, Naseem. Really very inspiring, dynamic, colorful, soulful music. I'm now going to hand you, we're going to go into the next question and answer session that's posed by the listeners. I'd like to hand you over to Sarah, who's taken over in the last few months our communications at PalMusic and has really transformed the way we handle our social media and the newsletter. So Sarah, thank you for all that you do. I think you've been picking up some of the questions. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is I was blown away by that, as was everybody's listening. I've got so many messages. I'm getting WhatsApp messages from friends, but we're getting tons of messages on the message as well. So thank you so much. And everybody's just extraordinary. The first question is largely a musical question for any of the musicians on the panel, but particularly I think for Naseem, which is is from Ashrith, and it's what got you interested in being a musician, and how does music make you feel when you're playing?
This is a great question. Maybe Wissam can also add to that. And at least for me, in the beginning, what got me interested, I was just drawn to the sound of the cello, the sound of the instrument. It really spoke to me, and almost every time I heard the cello, I would get goosebumps. You know, I would feel something. And it was this just trying to figure out why I felt that way is what drove me to actually learn the instrument. I wanted to figure out why that specific sound was really affecting me so much. And in the earlier performances, I have to say, it used to be a very intense experience, especially the first time I ever played with orchestra was when I played with the Palestinian Youth Orchestra in Jarash, in the first meeting ever of the Palestinian Youth Orchestra. And the very first time I sat in the cello chair in the orchestra and I felt surrounded by all this frequency and sound. It was a tremendous experience. And the experience that receiving the connection with the audience is what really drives me to keep going. It's performing and connecting with the audience and those intense feeling. It's almost like a high that you get out of the performance, and it's really it never goes away. It changes over the years, but it never really goes away.
And Wissam, have you got maybe?
Well, for me, actually, my parents took me to an oboe recital when I was about 8, 9, and I think I experienced my first miracle then. As I can describe it. I saw this, I'd never seen an oboe before. And I saw this man with a professor beard pull it to his face, take a deep breath. And then this incredible sound came out. And I think at that point, I wanted to become a wind player. Because to me, the miracle is that you take an invisible air, you harness it, and then out comes glorious kind of structured emotion through sound. And that feeling has never left me. In fact, when it does leave me, I'm not really making music anymore. So that's the beginning for me. Go on.
Yep. So we've got some more. So Dave was particularly inspired by Nigel Kennedy's proms with Palestinian musicians many years ago, 2012. And he asked, how do we get international stars, renowned musicians to go to Palestine, perform with Palestinian musicians, and then make sure we share that with the world, and talks about streaming. And I suppose added to that, I would add in, and is there anyone that you would love to collaborate with on musical projects of that sort?
Was this a question for me or was it for Wissam?
No, I'm on the bench. This is you're on the spotlight.
I actually one time I was performing at a conference for Palestine here called Tree of Life, and Roger Waters was also performing at the same time, and we got to play together a couple of songs, which was an unbelievable experience. I think I think we're doing quite a good job with the examples you already mentioned. Is a great thing, and I think just the more Palestinian artists we have around the world performing and collaborating with all kinds of musicians is the best way to get the message out and to get more renowned musicians interested and aware about what's going on. Because there's many that are not aware of the extent of the deep details about what's really going on in Palestine. I think this type of supporting the ESNCM and PalMusic and the work they're doing, and which is you can see how many every time I play a concert in the US, especially Arabic music, at least 50% of the band members are Palestinians, and then the rest are the rest of the Arab world, and it shows you how much Palestinian talent there's out there in the world. And everyone asks me, like, why are there so many musicians? It's almost like everyone is a musician in Palestine, or what's going on? I say that it's because, you know, music is so important in Palestine. It's really important for people, and the work that the ESNCM has been doing, it created a music scene and created so many musicians that are now all around the world, in Paris, in the United States, in Amsterdam, and all the major music hubs, New York. You can find many great Palestinian artists. So this is really amazing.
Yeah, no, that's incredible to hear that you played with Roger Waters as well. What a thing! I'd love to have seen that. A good link question, actually, bringing in Dr. Mitri Raheb as well as yourself, Naseem, is Sue asked if there were particular barriers or blocks to Palestinian culture that we should be aware of, you know, particular difficulties.
I mean, you know, definitely, because the occupation is not only occupies our land, but often it tries to occupy the culture. So many of the Palestinian, say, foods are sold being Israeli foods, from falafel to you name it, you know. I mean, we saw Lifta as a village. This is part of culture. You know, the people of Lifta, they live just few kilometers away from that village. They cannot return. It would be great if we could have Palestinian artists, you know, have this village again full of life and energy. That is not possible for us. And coming to the previous question, I mean, if we want to get professors from abroad, for example, to come and teach at our university or at the conservatory, it's so difficult. You know, often they were stopped at the border, they were sent back. Some of them were put in prison. So, I mean, if you say we are going to Bethlehem or to Palestine or to the West Bank or Ramallah, it's very difficult to get into the country. So this is another barrier. I mean, if we have great musicians abroad, Palestinian musicians who are not born in Palestine, they don't have an ID, they would love to come back and live back in Palestine, teach at our university. They are prevented, but if you are Jewish, you can come back anytime. So all of these are blocks on the way. However, and I think Naseem is a great example, but Wissam too. With all of this political and military power, the occupation was not able to crush our spirit. And so we see one generation after another of stars are rising. And this resilience is something amazing. And for me, tonight is really about this resilience. Nobody will be able, with all military power, to crush our spirit. That's it. And so this is for me the most important thing.
And Naseem, do you want? Have you had personal experience or anything that
Yeah,
you could add
I
to that?
think
Thank you.
Dr. Mitri Raheb said a lot of important points, and I think also the freedom of movement for Palestinian artists is one thing. There were many occasions where I was unable to be at the performance, or did not get a visa, and was one of the only artists out of everyone on the bandstand to not be able to be there, or have to go through crazy hassles in order to be at the performance because of having a Palestinian passport. Simply makes it just really hard to get a visa to many countries around the world, and that's in many ways due to the occupation. And being asked questions like, oh, is this many times when I'm traveling, touring, I would be asked the question, do you have any other passports when I arrive to the immigration borders? And they would look at the passport in a way that is not as if it's not a serious passport, or so on. So yeah, that's one part of how it becomes difficult for Palestinian artists to move and perform around, and that's why many are seeking other nationalities in other countries to be able to have a musical career with no limitation of freedom of performing in different places. That's just one example.
Thank you. It's so interesting to get those two perspectives there. Thank you so much. Just wanted to come on to some more about, we've had some more questions about the Edward Seed National Conservatory of Music itself. We're all very aware of the fact that we took a decision to host this on Zoom tonight, and thank goodness we did, because yet again, we find ourselves in the middle of the pandemic. And we've been asked about what is the impact of the pandemic for ESNCM in terms of learning, teaching, and organizationally. So I guess this is one for Lina and Wissam and Caroline, as well.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. Unfortunately, the last 2 years were quite challenging, and some modifications had to be made to some of the programs. But really, we have to recognize the excellent work that was done by the conservatory in bringing the right technology for the online teaching. They even, got some training, and it worked pretty well. But now the conservatory used to have 1,200 children in the different towns and cities, and the outreach, it has an outreach, very important outreach program. But now there are difficulties in getting children to, getting parents to register their children, maybe some economic constraints, movement constraints, or, sometimes fear from the, pandemic and this kind of thing. But they're, doing their best, really. It hasn't been easy. Even, at one point, teachers were not paid full salaries. They had to cut down in spite of all our wish to, because teachers are also a source of support to their families. So this continues, the challenge continues a little bit. But as Dr. Raheb mentioned, a big challenge today is to get some special qualified teachers to, enrich certain aspects of the program. And there is really, really a big, big problem to have these teachers come in, as Dr. Raheb has correctly said. But I would just like to say one last word about the previous question about getting, important, well-known musicians coming to Palestine. Of course, we welcome that. And if I can just say a word about Nigel Kennedy. Nigel Kennedy came to Palestine to give a concert. It wasn't sponsored by the conservatory, but when he discovered that there was a conservatory, he asked to have about 8-10 students play with him in the concert. So the conservatory welcomed that, and the students were thrilled, and he worked with them for 4 days, and he gave them special parts to come in. And then when he left, he told the director of the conservatory, Suhail Khouri, I think I want to bring these children to London. So what do you know, after maybe 6-7 months, Nigel is always asked to give a concert at the proms, and the BBC asked him, and he said, sure, very willingly, but I want to bring a group to play with me. Okay, what group? A group from Palestine. Why Palestine? We have groups here. He said, I met these kids and they inspired me. Their love of life is different than ours. And we managed, we got, I forgot now, maybe 14, 15, and it was really overwhelming. And just to end, one of the students who came, a violinist, is now a member of Nigel's team, playing with Nigel and his team. So this is a small, so we do welcome, big artists, small artists that can come and add some, spark to our program.
Yeah, I might add something. In PalMusic, we want to encourage people to go to Palestine, teachers to go to the conservatoire and work there. And we want to give this extraordinary talent in Palestine as much room and encouragement as we possibly can. But we need to make sure that things like COVID don't destroy what we're doing and what has been achieved so far. And we really want in PalMusic to push the boundaries out and get more people over there and bring more Palestinians over, not only over to the UK, but to Europe, to the world, but to us over here at the moment. And we can only do that gradually, but we will strain as much as we can to get people over. And it was interesting when we brought the Palestine Youth Orchestra over in 2016, a couple of kids from Gaza, a couple of musicians from Gaza couldn't get visas, just didn't come. And I was also amazed when I was doing a lot of work, kind of secretarial work for that, where everybody was. That was an orchestra that came from not just from Palestine, and it came from Egypt, Jordan, the UK, America. It's where the Palestinian diaspora had placed musicians. It was very moving.
I think this is a good point where maybe, Sarah, do you want to say something?
Oh no, I just want to say, as somebody who experienced that as somebody from outside PalMusic, it was an exceptional concert, but I realise we're kind of straining our time, and we've had such amazing contributions. Thank you to everyone.
Well, I think since we're straining our time, unfortunately we're straining our time, it's very sad. I think I really should thank everybody who's contributed to this concert. It's been the most magnificent concert, a magnificent performance, such wonderful music, such a penetrating talk from Dr. Mitri, such love and fire in the belly from Wissam, and such excellent music from Rashid Zaharoum, from the Bazouk Ensemble, and Naseem. The way you deal with the cello is wonderful and exciting. And I've always thought it was an instrument that could do so much. My goodness, you've made it do a lot. Thank you. So I want to thank everybody, the audience, the musicians, and I actually particularly want to thank the very hardworking PalMusic staff, without whom this would not have taken place. And I'd like to thank our supporters, our donors, and our previous chairman, Heba Zafiriou Zarafi, and all the people who have contributed to making PalMusic work. It's been a wonderful occasion, absolutely wonderful, and a prelude to the Christmas joy and excitement that can't be stifled by the political and military circumstances of Palestine, and can't be, or by indeed COVID, but more particularly can't be stifled by the extreme difficulties that so many Palestinians operate under, and for which we would very much like to see, which we would like to see lifted and different. So now let's end with Bethlehem itself. And thank you all so much. A very happy Christmas and festive season to you all, wherever you are. And thank you.